Have you heard of Kate Bush? Well, before we hear from the woman herself, let's talk to one of those original fans, the Times writer, author and former music journalist, Caitlin Moran. And I started asking Caitlin by how rare it is to hear from Kate Bush herself.
As a species, you always feel kind of flattered when she when she reappears. You're like, oh, she still likes us. That's nice. We must be good people if she's still keeping in communication with us. Well done, us.
It is that element. And with this, though, and this number one, 37 years after she released that track, she's broken 3 records, including the oldest woman to have that position, taking over from Cher. But why do you think she means and meant so much to so many people?
I hugely enjoyed Cher's message to her when she took over. So Cher previously been the oldest. She was 52 when Believe came out, and Kate's now 63 and she's now the new number one. And Cher went onto Twitter, as she does, and went, "Bravo, Kate. Records are meant to be broken. Remember back in the day when women had short sell-by dates? We had to fight our way through the testosterone curtain, and we did it so that the girls who came after us could sing as long as they want." There's so many great things in that. I love the idea of a testosterone curtain because there was when Kate came along. Like, my daughter's a musician now, she's 19, and I keep trying to explain to her how few women there were around when Kate Bush came along. The really, I was a music journalist in the 90s, and like once a year we do a special on women. And that was in the 90s. We'd like sit around and work out if we could put a woman on the cover.
Oh,
women just did not make music. It was extraordinary. Things have changed so much now. It's absolutely flipped now. Music is dominated by women. It would be very difficult for you to sign a male artist or a band. It's all about women now. And so much of that is to do with Kate Bush, because she came along, and previously many female artists had understandably felt that they had to compete with the same kind of rage and in the same kind of way that male artists did. But Kate is the most female artist. She just floated on and did it all like a girl or a woman would. When you see Wuthering Heights for the first time, she was 19 and she's dancing around in her nightie, singing about Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. So suddenly you don't have to be this big rock pig man in a pair of leather trousers just shouting about hell and destruction. You can be a bookish, nerdy girl still in your nightie and just float onto television and float to number 1 in the charts. And it's just the uncompromising femininity of her that I love most.
Yes.
Yes,
it's such a good point. And also at the same time, which is something I talked about with her, she was at the cutting edge of technology, of what you could do, which is brilliant. And this vision of hers was so clear, even from the beginning, which again was rare, especially as a female artist.
Well, I know you're going to hate me banging on about feminism on Woman's Hour, but obviously I see this all from a feminist point of view, because her love of technology, she's so nerdy. So she got really early into synthesizers, particularly Fairlights, which weren't just a synthesizer. It's a whole kind of a thing that allows you to produce stuff and sample sounds. And so many female artists around that time got obsessed with this really new technology, because it basically allowed you to have your own band, your own orchestra and your own production that you could do yourself. So suddenly you weren't, as previously you had to, going into a studio full of men all smoking cigarettes going, "You sure about that, love? Sounds a bit weird." You could just sit at home with your Fairlight and do what the hell you wanted. And you just, artists need privacy and they need not to feel judged. And for women particularly, that's a very rare thing. And she really fought for that.
Yes, well, she brings up the Fairlights in our discussion. So it's in there. Don't you worry. And because of that, a lot of women in particular and men look up to her, don't they? That clarity of vision, that control of the work and what she wants to do.
I find it really interesting that she's often described as being quite mystical and magic and almost unreal. And obviously that element is there, and in the things that she does and in the way that she presents herself. But I think so much of why we look up to her as this almost kind of unreal creature that came sort of tiptoed out of Narnia is you're looking at a woman who has been completely in control of her life and her career from day one. The reason she seems so mysterious and magical is because she hasn't been upskirted. She doesn't have to be on TikTok. We don't really know anything about her private life. She's been entirely in control of her career since the beginning. She formed her own management company. And it's also the other thing that I love about it is when I talk to my girls about women in music, there's no bad or sad bit about Kate Bush's story. It's amazing that music is there for so many female survivors, but when you're reading a biography of a woman in music, be it Chrissie Hynde or the Go-Go's or Viv Albertine from the Slits, a lot of it is very traumatic and very sad, and it's incredible, and that's why they go into music. Kate, there's no bad bit. She's a lovely middle-class girl who like is a friend of David Gilmour from Pink Floyd, who hands her amazing demos onto EMI, and then she's incredibly successful. She's brilliant at what she does. She's a nerd. She's incredibly hardworking. She was the pioneer of the overhead mic so that she could dance on stage.
I love that. I absolutely love that. When you think about, because, you know, even mics to this day, again, get a bit feminist on Woman's Hour, it's been known to happen. But, you know, in a television studio, as I am in sometimes, and you want to wear a dress, it is the most horrendous process of trying to get it onto your bra strap and all these different things, because it's been designed essentially for the suit. And her putting a microphone on her head, it's like the first iteration of the Britney mic, as it became known, is brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. Madonna, Britney, because girls want to dance, right? Like, kind of like you go to a nightclub, who's on the dance floor first? It's the girls. Like, kind of like girls want to dance. Of course she wanted to dance.
And talking about girls, and you know, you've spent a lot of your career, especially of late, writing about girls and how young girls are and how they build themselves. There is now a whole new generation of people, you know, girls and boys, connecting with her through Stranger Things. What do you think it is that gives them that affinity?
I mean, it just sounds perfect and magical. It is another world. Nothing else sounds like that. No one else has a voice like that. No one else wants to do with their voice what she wants to do. But I think a lot of it is, in a way, it's amazing that she was as successful as she was at the beginning of her career, because it is so feminine. It is so uniquely itself that it's only now, as women in the music industry start to dominate, that we're really ready to understand quite how uniquely female and uncompromising she's been in her work. Like there's one song, there's this song called Mrs. Bertolozzi on Ariel, that when it came out, all the male critics were so sneery about it, because it describes her coming home, or a character coming home with the family after a long day's walk, and there being mud all over the floor, and she's washing the mud off the floor, and then she puts a wash on, and then the chorus is her just singing the words washing machine over and over again in very high-pitched voice, and then going wishy-washy, clean the shirts. All the men who reviewed that were just sneering, just going, she's crazy. Who would sing a song about a washing machine? This is so boring. Why is she doing this? As a woman who spends most of her life putting on either a mixed or a white wash, of course she would want to write a song about that. And of course the song she then drifts off into this beautiful dream world about, as she looks in the washing machine and it's churning around, she remembers standing in the sea and watching the sea churning around. And she goes off into a little lady daydream while she's putting a white wash on. And it's no more stupid for someone to write a song about putting a wash on than it is for the Rolling Stones to sing "Waiting for My Man." Like, he's just standing on a street corner waiting to get his drugs deal. That's no more weird a thing to write a song about than putting on a wash. I just love Kate Bush for just singing women's lives in a woman's voice and dancing in a woman's way.
I know, and I have to say, ever since I heard that song, which I also love, and I love the stories that she tells, because, you know, that it's not confessional. These are stories. It'll be inspired, of course, by things she's seen and felt, and in this case, a washing machine. But standing in front of a washing machine has never been the same again for me ever since I heard that, because of the journey she took me on in my mind.
Totally. And all that album, Ariel, I mean, as I get older, I think that might be my favourite album of all time ever, because she does this thing that is so the hardest thing to do. She tries to describe a day. As you get older, the idea that, like, kind of, you're never going to have this day again, that they slip through your hands. And so all of side 2 of Ariel, Sea of Honey, is just her describing, you know, the colour of the sky, the colour of the sea. And Nocturne ends with her just sort of shouting over and over again, the sky is changing colour, it's changing now, with this desperation, but also incredible beauty, because she's trying to describe a moment, a second, life. And there is no one more alive than Kate Bush. These artists come along who seem to have bigger eyes and hearts and mouths than everyone else. And they're just basically standing at you and standing there staring at you and going, we're alive. Like, this is it. We're alive.
And
like,
I wanted to pick up on that point, Caitlin, because I remembered when you wrote it, and I looked it back up before talking to Kate Bush, because you were lucky enough to go in 2014 to the Hammersmith Apollo to see her for those run of shows that, you know, people were travelling all around the world to try and go and see her live. I wasn't able to, but you took me there through your experience. And I remembered the piece, I looked it up, and the way that you end that piece is you talk about emerging after 3 hours, newborn, and having been reminded by Kate Bush of what it is to be alive.
And that's really not an overstatement. Sometimes as a music journalist, you do lean a little bit into the invective and just be like, it was just mind-blowing. It wasn't. It was some men playing some songs. This was genuinely a rebirth. There's a moment in that concert where she's sitting and playing at a piano, and suddenly a tree bursts through the floor, through the piano. And then 10 minutes later, she's turned into a one-winged bird and she's flying through the air. And then confetti with and then confetti with poems written on them shower from the ceiling. So we're literally standing in a rain of poetry. And the fact that there was no reason for her to do these gigs. Like, she just came out of nowhere, suddenly announced it, put on this astonishing, absolutely reinvention of what music and live gigs are. Like, that these gigs presuppose that nothing that had ever happened in rock culture that was made by men had ever happened. It was as if punk had never happened, and instead ballet was the predominant sort of cultural form for 40 years. It was a complete reinvention of what you would do on stage. And we were all... That night, the third song she played was Hands of Love, and I was so not ready for it. I literally collapsed on the floor in front of my friend, just going, I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready for it to be Hands of Love. And because Hands of Love is one of the greatest songs of all time ever. And also the chorus is Kate Bush pretending to be a dog. She's just going, ow, 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 like she's being a cartoon dog. Like, she's so silly. And all the best people are silly. All the best people are funny. She sees the humor in music. She's, you know, she's obsessed with comedians. Kind of like the only people you see her sort of hobnobbing with in public aren't other rock stars. It's comedians. So she goes and has a lot of Chris Morris from the Day to Day. She's like sort of. She did a song about Ken Livingstone for the comic strip. Like,
I did not know that, and this is why, Caitlin, I asked you to come on today as the perfect warm-up act for everyone to hear from Kate Bush herself. So thank you.
Oh, God, my absolute pleasure. I would warm up for Kate Bush any day, and I hope she's listening and wants to be my friend. So that's mainly why I'm that's a solid pit to become her mate.
That's your reason for coming on this morning. We are very grateful, and I know, as your background with a music journalist, that you would tell us things we didn't know, and I learned quite a few bits in there, even though I've spent the last few days immersing myself in Kate Bush. Caitlin Moran, thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, darling.